I want to give an especially warm welcome to Eric Schwartz, who was our 2014 Social Innovator of the Year, and he is going to be introducing this year's awardee. For 20 years, Eric was the co-founder and CEO of Citizen Schools, a nationally recognized and nationally scaled after-school and expanded learning time organization. Like all great social entrepreneurs, in 2015, Eric went on to co-found another social venture, and today he serves as the CEO of the nonprofit College for Social Innovation, whose mission is to prepare college students for high-impact careers in social entrepreneurship and public service through their flagship program, Semester in the City. Eric and his team are highly valued and trusted partners and friends to us here at UNH. We're proud to be a founding partner for Semester in the City, the first university to give our students access to this program. And today we also serve as the National University of Record for Semester in the City. So Eric, welcome. Thank you for all of your collaboration, and thanks for introducing our Social Innovator for 2021.
Fiona, thank you so much. Thanks to your whole team. I think almost every day I talk to a UNH graduate doing amazing work in Boston and beyond Boston. And so many of them, all with purpose-filled careers that really come through the Changemaker Collaborative that you all lead. So thank you for that incredible work. We're excited to be part of it. I'm delighted to be here to celebrate the 9th anniversary of this event and of this award, and particularly delighted to get to introduce this year's winner, a good friend of mine, Tulaine Montgomery, who is one of the wisest and warmest human beings you will ever get a chance to meet. And I think you'll see that over the next half hour or so. So I'm just going to say a couple quick things about Tulaine and then turn the floor over to her. Tulaine is the co-CEO of New Profit, Inc., and a real national leader in getting philanthropy to rethink how it invests and who it invests in. She's also a founding board member of College for Social Innovation and has gotten to know Fiona and her team through that work as well. Tulaine's amazing, but I want to leave you with sort of 3 vignettes that give a sense of the whole Tulaine and of her commitment to building a more beloved world and a more joyful world. So imagine first Tulaine as a 9-year-old who takes up the cello and walks and drives and takes public transportation around her home city of Cambridge, Massachusetts, with a musical instrument larger than her young self, committed to mastery and committed to bringing joy and music to other people. Imagine Tulaine as a 24-year-old starting her career and working with me as part of the founding team at Citizen Schools and deciding, well, yeah, that's a lot of work, but I want to do more. And so adopting 3 teenage daughters as a 24-year-old and serving as their mother and their mentor and moving them forward. And imagine Tulaine in more recent years with her mother serving as a playwright and now a stand-up comic and thinking again about how to bring joy and wisdom to the world around her. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce this year's award winner, an amazing human being, Tulaine Montgomery.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you for the introduction, the reminders of carrying that big, heavy cello as a little girl, and really for your friendship and just for years of being someone who has conspired to make the world a better place. Just thank you for all of that. And I just want to thank the UNH Changemakers community for the invitation to join you all here today. It's a really special day, and I'm just honored to be part of this community with you. I first connected to this community many years ago and didn't actually know the connection was happening. Fiona talked about the role that Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus played in the formation of this event. And many years ago, I'm going to show you a little picture, old school. Hopefully you guys can see it. I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Muhammad Yunus about just his sense of vision and what it meant for him to be a change maker. I knew at the time that he is someone who I draw inspiration from. I didn't know at the time that I would be privileged enough and honored enough to be in a cohort of leaders who were honored. And so it just is really kind of takes my breath away to be here with you today at the Social Venture Innovation Challenge. So congratulations to the finalists. I had the opportunity to sit in on the finalist presentations earlier today. And as the judges said, I was also just inspired, encouraged, energized, motivated. And I do hope that each and every one of you, regardless of the outcome of this particular award, that you all really continue to build these institutions and expand on these brilliant ideas. Do not give up. And do not let any obstacle or surprise deter you from the vision that you're building. It's so important and so needed. So listen, let's get into it. 2026 marks the 250th birthday of this grand human experiment that we call American democracy. And, I think that when we're approaching milestone birthdays, it's important to take stock. And if you think about your own life, or you think about the lives of people around you, when we approach milestone birthdays, we tend to take stock. I'm blessed to have basically a football team worth of nephews. I only have nephews, and they are brilliant and wonderful, and they are across a range of ages. But what I know to be true is that for each and every one of them, when they are approaching a birthday that they consider a milestone, whether it be going from the single digits to the double digits, or going from preteen to teen, or whatever the milestone is, that there's a whole process they go through to take stock, to think about what they can now do that they couldn't do before, what it is they need to do differently because of the milestone birthday that is approaching. And I believe that if that's taking stock, if that's what we do as individuals, I believe that as a society, here in the United States of America, that we have an opportunity to also take stock, to take collective stock, and to be honest with ourselves about what we're doing that serves us, what we're doing that hinders our ability to make good on the promise of this experiment of American democracy. And listen, I know that even the notion of the United States of America as a nation, it's fraught with great pain, with violence in many cases, and with inequities. And so all of you who are here today have in some way made a commitment to address the inequities that are still, persistent in this country that has taken on the challenge of creating a thriving democracy that actually works for all of us. So in order to get there, I have a few thoughts that I want to share with you. I feel like there's a lot of hope for the future, right? But the thing about hope, the way that hope is not naivete, is that we look eyes wide open at where we currently are. And so I think it's important. I think hope is essential. I don't think that hope has lost its sort of run, but it's important that we combine hope with an unshakable gaze at the truth of the world in which we live. And so there's a couple of things I want to just offer, right? Collectively, we're facing critical challenges, and they cross all dimensions of life, whether it's health, climate, democracy, civil rights, human rights, economic mobility, across multiple dimensions of life. We're facing a series of collective challenges, right? And that's why your work as leaders and problem solvers has never been more critical than it is right now. A couple of indicators, a couple of sobering statistics that help root us in just how serious the challenges are. When we look at low-income communities in the United States, they're disproportionately impacted by air pollution and environmental toxins. For example, more than 1 million African Americans live within a half mile of natural gas facilities. That doesn't happen sort of by accident. That happens through a set of systems that interplay with one another. We'll talk a bit more about that. Over 1 million African Americans also face a cancer risk that's above the EPA's level of concern due to unclean air. And the more than 6.7 million African Americans live in the 91 US counties that have oil refineries. So that's just one sobering statistic that shows that there is deep interplay between work around sustainability and work around justice and equity, right? Because the way that systems work in our country and our world, it means that groups that have been overlooked or underestimated, groups that do not benefit from the same level of protection as other groups, that those groups are also disproportionately impacted by the negative consequences of climate change, right? So and I feel like this is a community where you all understand that. You don't separate sustainability from equity. You understand that there's a deep interdependence between focusing on sustainability for our planet and equity in our world and in our communities. So with all that being true, it's also true that we're in the middle of really a great awakening. You know, I talked about 2026 being the 250th birthday of the United States of America as a nation, right? Well, that is a chance to really look at a reawakening, a refounding, if you will, of the core driving principles of this country, right? And you're all part of that. We're all here today because we're here to heed the urgent call to action, to reimagine and re-architect the core elements of our society. And we need social entrepreneurs who are willing to take the big risks, dream up the big ideas, make mistakes and get back to it so that we can actually, you know, perhaps even in our lifetime, see a world that looks dramatically different than what we know today. Things that, you know, maybe seem like the edge, the radical edge of design are actually possible in our lifetime. And you all are helping to drive that. You know, I'll say just a little bit about my story because I think part of what we need to do in order to change the world is we do need to get closer to one another. I'll talk more about that in a moment. You know, what I saw in the presentations earlier is the fact that all of you really own your multitudes. And I share that, right? So I come to you having a range of experiences. I come to you as a serial social entrepreneur, having worked with great leaders like Eric Schwartz and many others. I come to you as a musician. I come to you as a comedy connoisseur. If anybody wants to talk later about Richard Pryor and Red Fox, I'm here for it. I'm happy to do that. And I come to you as somebody who has a passion for education and for a better world. And I see that all of you who presented earlier today and who've been part of this competition really own your multitudes and bring all dimensions of your life into the work you do, and keep doing that because we need solutions and ideas that take into account the way we live across many dimensions. Don't sort of treat us as if we have a one-dimensional life. None of us do. For decades, I've been working with visionary leaders and social entrepreneurs, and there's a few things I want to lift up. I started my career actually in business strategy consulting. And I'll tell you, I learned some great skills there that I draw on from this day. But one of the key themes I learned that applies to my work as a change maker is that the brands that we are loyal to, we expect them to behave as if they know us, right? And think about the brands that you're loyal to, the products that you're loyal to, the experiences that you consistently participate in. You expect the people who are driving those businesses and those experiences to behave as if they know you, as if they value who you are, and as if your input, your aspirations, your cultural context, as if it matters when they design their products or experiences. And yet when we move into the space of social impact, we sometimes ignore that principle that serves us so well in our day-to-day life. And so sometimes when we're innovating or designing or funding an idea, we don't take the time to get close and proximate to the people who are living in the systems, in the context that we want to meaningfully change. I saw examples outside of that in the finalists earlier today, but it's still not quite the norm for those of us who care about sustainability and social impact. And so we'll talk a little bit about ways to make that the norm. I moved from business strategy to education, from that into social entrepreneurship, focusing on what does it take to enable people to have equitable access to a healthy, thriving life, equitable access to dignity. And with all of that experience, there's a few things that I want to share that I would consider almost advice. First, let me tell you a little bit about New Profit, where I currently have the privilege of serving as co-CEO with my partner in purpose, Vanessa Kirsch. Couple things. At New Profit, it's our mission to invest in and support social entrepreneurs who are advancing a vision for an America that truly works for everybody. And it's important to note that New Profit was founded by social entrepreneurs for social entrepreneurs. So it's a philanthropy that takes into account that leaders need access to support, unrestricted capital, capacity support. They need allies and partners who can stand shoulder to shoulder with them as they build a vision for a better world. Running a social impact enterprise is not easy. It's not for the faint of heart, and it's never done in isolation. And so New Profit is committed to supporting these visionary leaders with capital and capacity support. We started this work back in 1998. And back then, the social sector looked very different than it did today. There was not a lot of talk of venture philanthropy. And back then, only a few nonprofits had crossed the $1 million threshold in terms of operating budget. And most of those organizations were organizations that had been around for multiple decades, and in some cases, hundreds of years. Think like American Red Cross and institutions of that genre and that era. So, unlike in the for-profit space where the best entrepreneurs have access to financial, strategic, and ecosystem support, when we talked about social impact, certainly in 1998 and to a lesser degree still today, those resources weren't readily available to those social entrepreneurs in the way they were for other entrepreneurs who were working in a purely for-profit context. So that's why for the past 20 years, New Profit has been applying the principles of venture capital to the social sector to bring these supports to bear for problem solvers like many of you who are with us today. And this approach to venture philanthropy, honestly, has fundamentally transformed the social sector, empowering a whole generation of philanthropists and impact investors to change the way that they do the work they do. So there's more to say as it relates to New Profit. Right now, we're really excited that we're currently raising $100 million in capital to support social entrepreneurs, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous leaders who have brilliant insights and innovations, but as the data shows, are often overlooked and underfunded when it comes to building their enterprise. And so we call that proximate capital. And it's just one way that New Profit is committed to advancing equity in the social impact and social innovation space. But I'll tell you, I've learned a lot over the past decades of doing this work. And, I've learned how to find and support great leaders, how to build and grow institutions. I've learned about some of the barriers and opposition to equitable capital markets that support social change. But I've also learned a lot about what it takes to be somebody who stays in the fight of social justice and sustainability for the long haul. And if you'll bear with me, I want to just offer a few ideas that are really not just advice from me to you, but kind of transparent sharing of what are daily practices for me as somebody who's committed to living and working as a change maker really for all of my days. One is we don't get what we want, we get what we believe. And what I mean by that is it's really tempting in the space we're in to focus primarily on problem identification and not nearly enough on solution design. Now, for this audience, all of you have made a commitment to stay in the solution space, but I'll tell you, from firsthand experience that it gets hard to stay there. There are so many factors at play that would convince us that if you're sophisticated and rigorous with your thinking, you're not necessarily believing in the possibility of transformation. And so it's really important to focus on your belief, to focus on your vision, to talk about your vision with each other as often as you can. It may sound like it's the surface and it's not as important as the structure and design of your innovation, but I'll tell you that when you talk about going from ideation to implementation, to scale, to sustainability, going across that spectrum of growth, it requires that you really revisit belief. You have to really understand that belief matters as much as capital when you're talking about changing the world. So that's one thing. We don't get what we want, we get what we believe. Focusing on belief as a key element of your work, move into solution design and stay in that space and build community with others who've made a similar commitment. Another piece is embrace complexity. I believe we get in trouble as change makers when we hold on to binary frameworks, right? The idea that either you are rigorous or you are real and at the community level. The idea that either you are driven by relationship or you're driven by a profit margin. These binary frameworks, and there's many others, I believe that most of them are illusions and none of them serve us well as change makers. So it's really important to take stock of the progress that you're making with your innovation, reject the binary stories, and embrace ideas that seem to be in conflict. So I talked earlier about some of the stark inequities that play out when we talk about the impact of environmental racism. Well, it's also possible and true that some of the best solutions to that pain exist in the people who have been most directly affected by the inequity. So it's not that there's simply a community that has been disproportionately impacted. It's true that there's also a community that has expertise that we can benefit from and draw on when we're designing solutions. So when you're building innovations, are you talking to the people who are most often impacted and least often listened to? If you're doing that, you're positioning yourself to embrace complexity and understand that anything that says it's either this or that is probably not telling the full story. The third piece of advice I want to offer is to keep your eyes on the prize. There's an American folk song that was really popular during the civil rights movement. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on, was a refrain of that song. And it's a song that civil rights leaders drew on when they were dealing with the messy middle, the discouraging distractions, and all the opposition to their fight for civil rights. It's easy to sort of, at this point, look back on that moment in history and kind of feel like, well, yeah, there was some fighting involved, but it kind of made sense. It was the right thing to do. So people sort of went along. It was not that. It was wrestling, with people who held power. It was driving innovative policy change. It was sitting with the resistance and with the struggle and with the discontent and with the slow pace of change. And I would offer that we as change makers have to have a similar kind of resilience and persistence when we talk about transformation. It's one thing to design an innovation. It's another thing to get it off the ground. It's one thing to build a minimum viable product, but it's a whole nother thing to stay the course over time. And so I would offer that our analytical minds and our public discourse convince us that visions for transformation are like naive, but that's just not true. We have to really hold the vision. Again, I keep talking about vision in these comments, in these remarks, because I do think that one of the ways in which we've been misled as change makers is to think that change happens primarily through our inventions and our capital allocations and our strategy. All of those things matter. But if you consult thinkers around systems change, folks like Peter Senge and John Kenya, they wrote an incredible article called The Water of Systems Change. They talk in that article about the explicit and implicit aspects of a system. And as change makers, I believe, and I would offer, that we need to get good at looking not only at the explicit, the products, the innovations, the technology, the capital, but also the implicit, the mental models, the beliefs, the relationships, and the networks. Because here's the thing. If we don't interrogate our mental models, our core beliefs, if we don't dramatically expand our networks and relationships, if we don't interrogate and transform the power dynamics of the spaces we're in, then even the most clever innovation will only advance sort of some version of, some incremental step away from the status quo. We've got to get to the root of the thing. And most of the roots are implicit and not readily visible to the untrained eye. So I would encourage all of us to really, as we keep our eye on the prize, take a look at the mental models, relationships, and power dynamics, and not sort of dismiss that as secondary to the capital, the technology, and the policy work that we do. The last piece I want to say is get closer. A theme of the work that we do at New Profit and that I believe is needed right now in our world is proximity. Brian Stevenson, who in his book, Just Mercy, he talks about proximity. His thesis that I agree with is that we would not have an American legal system that had such blatant racial bias if we didn't at some level as a country behave as if our fates are not interconnected. If you think about the reality of America, this is a very segregated country. We're segregated by racial identity, by economic class, increasingly by political affiliation and ideology. And yet we need each other now more than ever, right? We've talked a lot in this call and over the course of this day about climate change and the closing window of opportunity to change our outcome as a planet. So we need each other desperately, but we don't actually have a set of cultural norms that bring us together across these different identities and experiences. So my last piece of advice to you, and again, it's really more practice than advice, is to get closer, to make it your business, to build relationship with people whose identity and whose experience is different than your own. There's no way that we can proactively change the world if we don't have relationship with people who do not live the same life we live. And that's not just a good thing to do. There's not just a moral argument for that kind of proximity. It's actually strategically necessary, because we keep designing innovations that aren't informed by the expertise and insights of people whose lives are not like ours. So if we want to break through that, and I believe this is a community that is poised to break through that, if we want to break through that, we really need to find a way to get closer to people whose story is not our story. And that, again, has been, I think, in some ways dismissed as a sort of a nice to have, or maybe a touchy-feely, kind of warm and fuzzy thing that's not really rigorous or strategically central. And I would offer that that is a place where we all as change makers have been misled, that it is only through relationships that we can change the world, that change happens at the speed of trust. And to the degree that we're now living in a fragmented season in this country and in this world, where trust is at really an all-time low, that it is our work as change makers to not only build the brilliant innovation, the genius technology platform, do that work, but complement that work with a bold, radical capacity to get closer to people whose story is different from your story, knowing that that will enable us to actually transform the mental models, relationships, and power dynamics that truly fuel the systems that we want to see be different. So in conclusion, I will say, despite the complexity of the challenges that we all face, right, despite the urgency of the pace at which we need to operate, I really have faith in communities like this one. I have faith in leaders like you. I have faith in the ideas and creations that you are building. And I am really proud to be able to not only receive this award, but to be in community with people who inspire me and from whom I'm learning, even in these interactions like the ones we've had today. Thank you again to the UNH community. Thank you for creating a space where social innovation and social justice can be celebrated. And thank you for inviting me to join you today. It's been a true pleasure. I look forward to staying in communication. Thanks, everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tulaine, for such an enlightening talk today. As everyone hopefully knows, my name is Faina Bucher, and I'm the director of the Changemaker Collaborative. And on behalf of the program team, including Kathy Meyer and Kendall Gray and Fiona Wilson, I just want to note how exciting this whole event has been, as well as all the steps that led up to it. So for the next 10 to 15 minutes, we'd love to invite questions from the audience. We had a few that came in already, but please continue to add your questions in the Zoom webinar Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We will try to get to as many questions as possible. So, Tulaine, first question.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate on the generational shift towards making change and how things are different today in comparison to how they were in the past, if they are?
Yeah, I mean, I love that question. And I have a perspective on that is not always the popular opinion, but I'll go ahead and offer it to this community. I believe that there are some steps towards equity that have been, I'll say, de-risked in the past few years, right? There was a period not long ago, maybe even 3 years ago, if we're honest, where taking a bold stand for equity and social justice had a certain set of risks attached if you were also trying to raise capital and advance yourself in sort of traditional corporate environments. And with the racial reckoning that's been happening across our planet, some of those things have less risk attached to them for a little while. I think that window is closing. But I believe that this idea that there's generations that are starkly different from each other, I don't know if I buy it. When I talk about the binaries, the false binaries, I do actually believe that while there is incredible sophisticated analysis, courage, creativity that we're seeing in abundance in younger generations, I don't know that it is by itself what will transform systems. So what I mean is I'm a big fan of intergenerational coalitions. I believe that it's about not only the insights, bravery, and clarity of youth, also sophistication. I mean, I even in listening to the presentations earlier today, I was like, at that age, did I know enough to design something like that? No. So there is a sophistication and advanced thinking that I want to acknowledge. And yet we've been waiting for young people to save us since the days of Aristotle, right? The truth is that young people and the generations that are building creative insights are operating within systems. And I believe what it's going to take to truly change systems, to change those mental models that I talked about earlier, it's going to take intergenerational coalitions. So we have to, I believe, create spaces and networks where we don't reserve innovation for people who are under a certain age, and we don't create any barriers to enhancing, liberating, unlocking the genius that exists with younger people, but also exist amongst our elders. There's some elders who advise and guide me that I would put right next to some of the young genius that we've seen today. And I think together they can create something that has a shot at transforming systems. I welcome other questions.
Yeah, there's so many coming in. We had not a question, but somebody that wanted to say, Tulaine, you're incredibly or extremely inspiring.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank
you.
I'm inspired.
I couldn't agree more. Let's see. Next question, Tulaine. From the audience, I don't see myself as a future social entrepreneur, but I do want to make as much impact in my community as I can as a future educator. Yes. In your opinion, what would be the best way to do this?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I started in business strategy, but then went into education, and time was limited, so I didn't tell you my long story. So I love that. First of all, I love the clarity that you know what you want to achieve and have some insights into how you want to achieve it. So kudos to you for that clarity. And here's the thing, education, so much of everything that we're now dealing with is a product of educational systems. So if you are in a classroom, or if you are working within a school district, or if you are working within a system or university that trains educators, if you are working with families, in whatever way you touch education, if you're working in education philanthropy, education policy, that if you do that with an eye towards centering proximity, what I mean by that is, if you bring to bear, listen, I am not going to be a classroom teacher who ignores the insights and inputs of the community in which I'm teaching. If you're an educational policy person and you say, listen, I'm not going to advance educational policies unless I know that I have really not just vetted them, but co-designed as much as possible with the constituents that I want this policy to direct or inform or benefit. Like this, if you can center proximity and really honoring the expertise of proximity, the expertise of community, the expertise of constituents, the expertise of target customers, if you can make sure that however you touch education, proximity is at the core of your practice, be it teaching, be it running a school, be it raising funds for education, however you engage in education, it's critical, it's important. Know that. Don't be distracted by anyone who would tell you different. I remember when I went into education, there were some people who thought I should have done something that was different because they had a different relationship to the power of the classroom. I don't have that confusion. So I congratulate you on your choice and would say that the main way to ensure that you're doing your part within education to advance justice and equity is to always in your practice center proximity, center inputs, guidance, regard, and relationship with the communities and constituents that you want to educate, support, or work with.
Beautiful. Thank you. Next question. So oftentimes, especially nowadays, it's very easy to get put down and discouraged, maybe due to personal circumstances or other reasons. Mm-hmm. How do we not get derailed from the prize we want to work towards? Is there any advice that you could give to help us stay on track?
I love that question because it's one I wrestle with, really most days, right? I think one of the things we need to do, and I don't have advice, I have practices. Like anything I'm saying today are things that I am trying to practice on a regular basis in my life. And one of the big mistakes I believe we make as change makers is we underestimate the need for restoration. So I remember I used to, what it takes for me to sort of show up and do my best, my morning routine is quite something. You know what I mean? Like I got to drink a cup of hot water, do my meditation, a little journal writing, it's a whole set of things. I used to feel a way about that. I used to feel like, well, my goodness, like what's wrong with me that I need to do all this in order to be at my best? And then during meditation, actually, it came to me, wait a minute. I am, as a human being, I'm a microcosm of the planet Earth. And when we think about the planet Earth, we know that it needs protection and restoration. Not because it's broken or flawed, but because it is so uniquely powerful, beautiful, and necessary. And so if as a human, I'm a microcosm of the planet Earth, then my need to restore and protect my resource isn't a reflection of me being flawed. It's because I am precious and uniquely able to offer a specific set of resources to this endeavor of life that we're all living together. So what I mean by that is that was a moment where I understood, wait a minute, restoration is essential. And whatever that means to you, right? Inspiration is essential, whatever that means to you. So you have to, I believe, schedule in and make a practice, periodic, consistent, and steady restoration, be that rest, be that music, be that dancing, be that a good comedy show, whatever it is for you. That's not a nice to have or a luxury. That's required if you're trying to change the world and do something that's counterculture and have the vigilance and resilience and strength it takes to do it for the long haul. You also can't underestimate the need for inspiration. I would offer you an inspiration prescription. I would say, make sure you get at least 4 doses of inspiration monthly, that enable you to have a vision that is inspired and has energy for you. So an inspiration prescription and restoration is a must because you are a microcosm of the precious planet. And that means that you must be protected and restored, just like we know the earth must be protected and restored.
Wow, that gave me goosebumps. I love that. I had to write down inspiration prescription. I love that. So next question. Optimism and positivity are obviously crucial to success in this field.
Sure.
What helps you remain consistently hopeful in recent times of such adversity and a daily stream of bad news?
That's it. I'm laughing with recognition like, yep, ain't it the truth? What helps me be optimistic and hopeful is 2 things. I rely deeply on lessons learned from my ancestors. And I recognize that whatever it is I'm going through, as hard as it is, it's not actually as hard as what my ancestors have come through. And, the other thing is I tell myself the truth. So there's something about, I'm sure this community, you all have talked about the Stockdale Paradox, right? It's really something that comes up a lot these days. Short version of it, I believe Admiral William Stockdale, who was a Vietnam veteran, he was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam conflict, lived in arguably unsurvivable conditions for a really long period of time. He and a few of, the folks with him, his men, they were all males at the time, made it home. Many did not. And he was asked the question, well, Admiral, what enabled you to survive what seemed unsurvivable? And I'm going to paraphrase his response a bit, but he said, look, the people who were blind optimists, who just said, I'm going to make it home by Christmas and it's just going to happen and it will work. And they just were smiling and optimistic despite how awful it was around them. They didn't make it because the first holiday came and went. They didn't make it home. Their hearts were broken and they were destroyed. So then the question is, well, if it's not the optimists, then what are you saying? The pessimists, the other ones? And he's like, well, no, the people who were so busy stuck in their sort of sense of doom and hopelessness, they didn't make it because they didn't have any energy or capacity to envision and build systems that would enable their survival. So they were completely unable to survive. They didn't make it. They were among the first to go. So then it's like, okay, it wasn't the optimists and the hopeful ones. It wasn't the folks who were doubtful and felt sort of filled with dread and gloom. So then who made it? And Admiral Stockdale's answer was the people who survived, including myself, were the ones who were able to hold at the duality of an unshakable faith that they would make it home, unshakable. I don't care what I go through, how hungry I am, how much pain I'm in, I'm going to make it home. But they combined that with an unblinking eye that took in all the realities that they were living through, an unblinking eye that enabled them to see when they were getting water, what it was that enabled them to be in a position that caused less pain to their bodies. And it was the combination of the two that enabled them to survive what would be for most of us unsurvivable. Unshakable faith combined with an unblinking eye. So that's my answer. They call it the Stockdale Paradox in business circles. It's actually what my grandmama told me, tell yourself the truth and have faith. That's how she said it. But it's the same principle, right? Tell yourself the truth. Don't lie about that. There are dedicated resources and actors in this world right now that are advancing systems that are designed on inequity. That's real. It's not, we can't pretend that that's not true. And yet you have to have a clear and powerful enough vision that you can have unshakable faith that even with that, human beings are still able to innovate, connect, design, and reinvent. The founding fathers of this particular nation, they did that work on the weekends. They were farmers during the week, right? And I don't mean to underestimate, the brilliance of their intellect, right? But they were farmers during the week. They built the idea of this nation that was a complete contradiction to what they had experienced prior on the weekends, and had a deep vision, an unshakable faith, and an unblinking eye. And they made a lot of mistakes. Based on the packaging I'm in, I can certainly tell you that I have had lived experience to those mistakes. So I'm not saying it was perfection, but I'm saying that that combination of unshakable faith and unblinking eye is what enables me to be optimistic and hopeful and yet wise. I don't believe in being naive. I believe in wisdom and faith and action together.
Wonderful. So next question. Thank you for that. What is the best way to communicate with others who have different opinions? Some people get aggressive when they're approached by others about different issues, whether racial injustice, environmental justice, or others. And this audience member just wanted me to say, love your earrings, by the way.
Well, thank you for the earring shout out. Yeah, so this is the thing, right? One thing I will say is I didn't talk about what we do with rage and grief in the effort to change the world. And I just want to say it. What makes it hard to talk to folks who have a different ideology is often our rage and our grief, right? How could you think that? I can't believe you want that. And it's sort of, we get hooked into our response to, what we see as the impact of the way other people see the world. And that's human. So I think that as a change maker, it's really important to create space to have grief, to have rage, to be upset at the state of our planet and what in the world is it going to take for us to actually understand we don't have much time. Like whatever is hooking you that feels heavy or hard, I don't think you can just sort of operate around it. I don't think you can suppress it. I think you do have to create safe spaces, whether it's friendship circles, the dinner table with your family, therapy, whatever it is. Create safe spaces where you can express and acknowledge the grief and the rage that is part of wanting to change the world. It is not, all rainbows and sunshine and everybody makes a way for this idea you have for equity. That's not how it works, right? So that's one piece. But then the other piece is, I said earlier, get closer. Like, here's the thing. There are some people who actually want to cause harm, but they are the minority of this, I'm sure. Most human beings want well-being. They want to be heard. They want to be respected. And part of where we get into these like fights that feel immovable is people who have been overlooked and ignored. And they come in all racial identities, by the way. The people who've been overlooked and ignored feel like that point where they're talking with you is about, you're going to hear me. You're going to learn today is sort of a comedy expression people use. So, you're going to hear me. And so instead of it being about an exchange of ideas or getting to know one another, it's about taking a stand to finally be heard. So if you can be somebody who can remove that need to be heard, who can have a strong opinion that's loosely held, who can be willing to be dead wrong when you're talking with someone about an idea. This is what I believe. I might be wrong about it. Let me hear how you see it. And that takes, you can't do that and be fake. You have to genuinely mean, I'm willing to be completely wrong. But I think part of why it gets so hard, especially nowadays, is because there's so much that's stirring fragmentation in our country, right? That's telling us that this and that can never come together and they're at war. And like, that's the messaging, that's the narrative that's out there. But when it comes to the one-on-one, it usually is that people are trying to be heard for the first time because they feel like they're often not. So if you can genuinely create a space where you're listening, it doesn't mean you're going to agree. It doesn't mean you're going to say, I'm now with you. You might say, I'm now even more clear that I don't agree with you. Sometimes that's what happens for me. But creating a space where someone can be heard and witnessed can do so much to diffuse the rage and conflict. That's usually what it's about. It's not about that the ideas are in conflict, though they may be. It's about that the person speaking has the experience of being ignored or overlooked or mocked. And so when they're talking to you, they're going to show you who they are. And if you can just take it down by creating a space, like, I'm genuinely interested and curious and want to understand what you're saying. It doesn't mean I'm going to agree. But that's how I find I get past that. I talk to a lot of people who have a very different ideology than I do. And in many cases, we're able to build coalition, but it's because there's genuine listening. It sounds maybe trite, but it truly is the most important technology that we have as change makers.